Today, we're diving into a really fascinating legal puzzle, one that seriously questions the very definition of murder. And it all hinges on one single critical mistake made by the killers. So, think about this for a second. It sounds completely impossible, right? You want to kill someone, you do something that causes them to die, but somehow you're not guilty of murder? Well, this exact riddle was at the center of a real court case that could have changed everything we thought we knew about criminal law. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're going back to 1953. In what was then the British colony of Basutoland, it's now the country of Lesotho. The case is called Thabo Meli and Others versus the Queen, and it was so important that it went all the way to the Privy Council in London, which was one of the highest courts around at the time. Now, the four men at the heart of this, the appellants, they came up with what they thought was a foolproof plan. It was straightforward, it was brutal, and it was designed to kill a man and leave absolutely no trace of their crime. And the first part, it went off without a hitch. They got their victim to the hut, they hit him on the head, and he dropped, unconscious. In their minds, that was it. Job done. The man was dead. But right here, this is the exact moment where their so-called perfect plan just completely unravels. And it's not because they got caught. It's because of a huge and ultimately fatal miscalculation that they made. See? Because they were so sure the man was dead, they moved on to the final step of their plan, staging that accident. They took what they thought was just a corpse, and they rolled it off a cliff to make it look like he'd had a tragic fall. And here comes the twist. The medical examiner's report comes back, and it's a bombshell. The victim hadn't actually died from the blow to the head. He was just unconscious. He was still alive when they left him at the bottom of that cliff, and he died later from exposure. This one fact, this single detail, became the entire foundation for a very, very clever legal argument. This completely unexpected finding suddenly opened the door for a wild legal defense. Seriously, if this had worked, it could have created a roadmap for getting away with murder. The whole argument was about trying to split hairs on the timeline of the crime, and it all comes down to two really important concepts in criminal law. So, first up, for a crime like murder, the prosecution has to prove something called mens rea. It's Latin, and it literally means the guilty mind. This is the intent part, the decision, the thought to actually kill someone. And second, you need its partner, the Actus Reus, which is Latin for the guilty act. This is the physical thing you do that actually causes the death. The shooting, the stabbing, or in this case, leaving a man out in the cold to die. Now, here's the crucial part, the whole point, really. It's not enough that both of these things happened. The law demands what's called concurrence. The guilty mind and the guilty act have to happen at the exact same time. You have to be intending to kill at the very moment you're doing the thing that kills. So with that in mind, look at how the defense built their case. It was pretty brilliant, actually. They said, look, these are two totally separate events. Event 1, in the hunt, they had the mens rea, the intent to kill, sure, but their act didn't actually cause his death. Then, event 2, at the cliff, their act did cause his death, the actus reus, but they didn't have the intent to kill anymore because they thought he was already dead. So their conclusion? No concurrence, no murder. So the case goes all the way up to the Privy Council, and the judges have this massive puzzle in front of them. Was the defense right? Can you really chop up a crime like this into separate little pieces, or was this something else entirely? Well, the court's answer was basically no way. They completely rejected this attempt to slice and dice the timeline. To them, it was just impossible to look at this as two separate events. It was all one series of acts, all part of one single plan. The court laid it out so logically. Look, the men came up with a plan to kill somebody. Everything they did after that, from the first blow to rolling him off the cliff, was just a step in carrying out that one plan. That initial intent to kill didn't just magically disappear. It was the engine driving the whole series of events, right up until the man was actually dead. So you can really see the two clashing viewpoints here. On one side, you've got the defense arguing for two separate moments where their mistake was the most important thing. And on the other side, you've got the court seeing one long, continuous story where that mistake was totally irrelevant to their murderous goal. So the Privy Council dismissed the appeal. And this decision, this ruling, became a landmark. It's now known in law schools everywhere as the Thabo Meli principle, And what it did was slam the door shut on a very dangerous potential loophole in the law. So, what is this principle really? Well, it basically says that if you make a plan to kill someone, every single act you do to make that happen is treated as part of one big transaction. You can't use your own incompetence, like being wrong about whether your victim is dead or not, as a legal defense to get off on a murder charge. And so, in the end, all four of them were found guilty of murder. The law correctly saw that their guilty mind wasn't some brief thought that vanished after the first strike. Nope, it was the engine that drove the entire deadly plan, from that hut all the way to the tragic end at the bottom of the cliff. And that leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question. The Thabo Meli case forces us all to think about a pretty complex idea. What does the law even consider a single act? It shows us that an act isn't just one physical motion, but it can be an entire story, one that's shaped by our intentions from the very start to the very end.